If you're seeing this right now, it's probably because something has felt off these past few days. Nothing serious happened, nothing collapsed, but things don't feel fully in place either. It's that hard to explain feeling, like something is about to happen, even without any clear sign. You wake up, do what needs to be done, talk to people, but inside it feels like you're running on autopilot, not fully present, as if your body were a few steps ahead of your life. It's not ordinary anxiety, and it's not excitement either. It's more like standing at the edge of something, not having jumped yet, but also unable to go back to where you were. And if you feel this, let me tell you something right away. You're not confused, you're not overreacting, and this isn't random, because this kind of sensation doesn't appear out of nowhere. It usually shows up when something inside you begins to reorganize. Even if, on the outside, everything still looks exactly the same. If this describes what you've been feeling, stay here with me for a few minutes. Before anything else, let me tell you something important. What you're feeling does not mean there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're lost. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. And it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong with your life. A lot of people go through this moment, more than it seems. Especially those who have tried for a long time, who carried too much for too long, who learned to keep moving forward even when they were tired. Sometimes this discomfort appears precisely when you stop running from yourself, when you're not in crisis, but you're not at peace either. You look at your own life and don't feel despair, but you don't feel fully present either. And that's confusing, because no one teaches us how to deal with phases like this. We learn how to deal with problems, with losses, with obvious pain, but not with this kind of inner silence. So it's normal to try to ignore it, to think it's just tiredness, that it will pass on its own, that it's not worth paying attention to. But feeling this isn't weakness, and it isn't drama. It's simply a sign that something inside you has begun to ask for more space. Nothing urgent, nothing that needs to be solved right now, just something asking to be recognized. And the fact that you're here, trying to understand what's happening, already says a lot. You're not disconnected from your life. You're paying attention, and that alone already makes a difference. Maybe what you're living right now isn't a bad phase, but it doesn't feel like a good one either. It's more like an interval, that strange space between something that no longer works and something else that hasn't begun yet. You're not exactly unhappy, but you don't feel whole either. It's not a lack of will, it's not laziness, and it's not the kind of demotivation people usually talk about. It's simply the feeling of being between versions of yourself, like when you leave one place, close the door, but haven't arrived at the next one yet. Nothing has changed on the outside, but inside, something no longer fits the way it used to, and that's confusing, because life keeps asking for answers, decisions, energy, while you feel like you don't yet have enough clarity for any of that. It's uncomfortable to stay in this middle space. We prefer clear endings, or exciting beginnings, but almost no one talks about this quiet space in between. That moment when you haven't lost anything concrete, yet you can no longer fully recognize yourself in what you have. That's when many people start asking, what's happening to me? When, in truth, nothing is wrong. You've simply reached a point where the old way of living no longer sustains you, and the new one is still taking shape. It's not a fall, and it's not progress either. It's a crossing, and crossings are almost never comfortable. It's like standing at the edge of a high place. You haven't jumped yet, but you can't pretend you're not there. There's a slight tightness in your chest, not intense fear, but expectation mixed with caution. When you look back, you recognize the path that brought you here. It was difficult in some stretches, exhausting in others, and you know you can't return to exactly the same place. When you look ahead, nothing is fully clear yet. You can't see what the ground will be like after the jump. You don't know how you'll feel. You don't know what comes next. There's only this strange sensation of suspension, neither moving forward nor moving back. Most of the discomfort doesn't come from what might happen next. It comes from this pause, from this moment when your body has already sensed the change, but your mind is still trying to catch up. That's why standing still feels heavy, not because something bad lies ahead, but because remaining between two places demands more energy than continuing to walk. Being on the edge is tiring, even when nothing seems to be happening. And this is where many people get confused, because when this discomfort appears, the first reaction is to give it a negative name. to think it's anxiety, to think it's a lack of gratitude, to think it's laziness, or worse, to think life has lost its meaning. But most of the time, it isn't that. This discomfort usually appears when something in the way you live no longer fits. Even if you haven't consciously decided anything yet, one part of you tries to keep everything exactly the way it's always been, just to avoid dealing with the unknown. And then the body does what it always does when its senses change. It goes into alert, not because you're in danger, but because you're in transition. And transitions are demanding on the inside. It's exhausting to stay in this in-between, because you can still remember how things were before, but you can no longer fully fit there. So it starts to feel like nothing works. The things that used to distract you don't distract you as much anymore. The conversations that once filled the space now feel emptier. What used to excite you now feels distant, and that creates a knot inside, because we associate losing interest with losing ourselves. But maybe you're not losing anything. Maybe you're just becoming more sensitive to what no longer matches who you are. And yes, it's uncomfortable, because when something inside changes, even slowly, your entire life can begin to feel slightly out of place. Not because it got worse, but because you are no longer exactly the same. At this point, it may help to remember one thing. You don't need to make any decisions right now. You don't need to choose a path. You don't need to understand what comes next. And you don't need to turn this feeling into action. Not everything that changes asks for an immediate response. Some changes only ask for space. Maybe this isn't a moment to move forward, nor to move backward. Maybe it's simply a moment to stay. To stay observing what no longer makes sense. To stay noticing what feels heavier than before. To stay aware of what has begun to bother you, without fixing, without explaining, without trying to be emotionally productive. Trying to resolve everything while you're still crossing through it only increases the confusion. It's like trying to see the entire road in the middle of fog. You don't need to see far. You only need to be where your feet already are. And even if that feels like very little, it isn't. Being present at this point is already movement, even if it doesn't look like it. Sometimes, not moving forward is also part of the process. Maybe this state isn't rare. What's rare is realizing you've reached it. Most people pass through this exact point and never notice. They feel the discomfort, but they rush to fill it. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They convince themselves that everything is fine. And that's how something important gets lost. Without noise, without warning, without a goodbye, you stayed. Even without understanding, even without knowing what comes next. And maybe that's what makes this moment different. Not because something big is about to happen, but because, for the first time, you didn't look away. You're not standing still. You're at the edge.